What is the sell as is or process further decision? This is a type of incremental analysis in managerial accounting where a company decides, should we sell the product at the split-off point or incur additional cost to process it further and sell at a higher price? This question arises after a joint production process, where multiple products are created together until a certain point called the split-off point. Important definitions. Joint costs are costs incurred before the split-off point. The split-off point is the stage at which individual products become identifiable and can be sold or processed further. Further processing cost refers to the additional costs incurred after split-off to enhance the product or prepare it for sale. Relevant costs to consider. Joint costs are not relevant for the decision because they are already incurred and are considered sunk costs. Further processing costs are relevant since they are additional and will affect the decision. Incremental revenue is also relevant, as it's the new revenue from processing further. Opportunity cost is sometimes relevant, especially if processing further blocks another, possibly better opportunity. Memory hack. Use the rule of new. When making this decision, only include costs that are new, explicitly incurred for further processing, and will affect your profits. If the cost doesn't meet these, it's not relevant. Ask yourself, is this a new cost due to processing further? Will it affect my operating income? And can I avoid this cost if I sell now? So, let's break this down, shall we? When you're looking at costs, joint costs are actually irrelevant, so you can just ignore them. But further processing costs are relevant, so you should definitely include those. Incremental revenue? Yep, that's relevant too, so make sure to include it. Sunk costs, which are already spent, are irrelevant, so yeah, ignore those as well. And finally, opportunity cost, if there is any, is relevant and should be included. Here's a bonus tip. If something happened in the past, just ignore it. But if it changes your future profit, you should definitely include it. So, here's the final decision rule you need to remember. Process further if the additional revenue from processing is greater than the additional processing cost. But if the additional revenue is less than the additional cost, it's better to just sell the product as is. Simple, right? Alright, let's wrap this up for all the learners out there. In CMA decision-making, remember, don't cry over joint costs. Your focus should always be on what changes if you process further. Now, when do we actually ignore joint costs? Well, in sell as is or process. Further decisions, joint costs are considered sunk costs because the costs have already been incurred up to the split-off point. And these joint costs won't change whether you sell the product at split-off or process it further. Since they're not incremental, they're just irrelevant for decision-making. In this type of analysis, we focus only on incremental revenue, which is the extra revenue you get after further processing, and incremental cost, which is the cost of that extra processing. So here's the decision rule. If incremental revenue is greater than incremental processing cost, you go ahead and process further. Otherwise, just sell at the split-off point. Let's do a quick recap on when to use or ignore joint costs. For decision-making, like deciding whether to sell or process further, joint cost is not relevant because it's a sunk cost. But for inventory valuation, joint cost is relevant because accounting standards require it. When you're figuring out operating profit for financial reports, you need joint cost to match revenue with full costs. And for internal decision analysis, joint cost isn't relevant. Just focus on incremental changes. And here's an easy tip to remember. If the decision is still in your hands, joint cost stays behind. But if you're reporting what already happened, joint cost tags along.